It's time for Baseball's Last Frontier, stories from the Pecos League, the podcast that will open your door to baseball's entry level, telling you the stories of the teams, players, and coaches of an independent minor league circuit. I'm your host, Bruce McClure, and I have the pleasure of introducing to you my friend, partner, and co-host, and man on the inside, Evan Katz. Evan, I'm grateful for you this week. You know why?
Why?
You finally sent that heat that you've been having out there my way here in New London. I've got sunshine and about 90 degrees, and it's not raining.
Well, that's right. I think it rained in New England 14 straight weekends, something like that.
14 straight Saturdays here in my area in New Hampshire. We had some sort of measurable rain where it got to the point people were getting cranky, man. And
Well, here's the funny thing. The adult baseball league that I played in has its fields up in New Hampshire. I played 2 games before I left in the middle of May. And since I left until this weekend, they'd only played one more time.
oh man, really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, goes to show you. Here we are. We've flipped from cold and 65 and rain to hazy, hot, and humid, and we're going to hit 100 in New Hampshire for the first time in about a decade this week. So I'm loving this, but I'm wondering if you can tell me a story about thrifting in Trinidad you mentioned earlier. Help me out here.
Trinidad, Colorado. We were wrapping up our series there and had a chance to go downtown. I neglected to buy myself a bottle opener for my adult beverages that I like to have once in a while. And also my mouse for my laptop was being held together with an elastic. So when we drove into Trinidad, I noticed a couple of thrift stores, and I got myself a corded mouse and a nice beautiful metallic bottle opener for $2.75. So thank you to the thrift stores in Trinidad.
So he can actually open his bottles of sarsaparilla after the game and not have to worry about breaking the bottle open.
Right, although the hotel room I had been renovated for a while. It did have one of those bottle openers under the sink in the bathroom. I think it's time for a renovation.
Yes, yeah, that's top shelf all the way right there. Yeah. What's been going on this week, man? I understand you had some driving, you had some fundraisers. You've been out and about, huh?
Well, it's been, we had that 10-day, actually 11-day road trip. We drove back from Trinidad on Wednesday to arrive back for a fundraiser held by the Nebraska Athletic Club, which allows the players to work out there, raise some money, had a band and some food trucks there for some singing and just meet and greet some locals to spread the word about the 80s. So it's still early in the year. We'd only had, I think, 3 home games prior to our road trip. Thursday was a day for laundry for the players, groceries, and sleeping. And then it turns out while we were gone that the field had gotten really soaked. We spent 2 hours. We had puddles inches deep. We had sump pumps out on the field. The town came in and helped fill in some depressions in the field to even it out before we could even practice on Thursday. That game was postponed to a doubleheader Friday, not due to the field, but due to umpire availability. And Friday morning, we had our second baseball camp where we invite youngsters to come for pitching or for hitting, throwing, and fielding tutorials from the players. It's unfortunate we're competing with the Nebraska Land Festival, which goes for about 10 days here, includes a major rodeo, which apparently attracts over 200,000 people over the course of the event. Families go. It's a very this country singers. So we're competing against that. Unfortunately, didn't get a lot of youngsters. But the best part was Saturday we were able to get a float in the Nebraska Land Parade. And
okay, I want to hear about this.
25,000 people on the route. We gave out popsicles and free ticket vouchers for kids and wristbands. And we're hoping that by being in the parade, we're going to spread the word. And if it's a tie between going to the rodeo or the Luke Bryan concert, maybe they'll come to an 80s game.
You know what? They should be passing up rodeo, Luke Bryan, they should be passing up all of that to go down to the field and see you perform your duties as pitching coach of the North Platte 80s.
Bullpen coach.
Bullpen coach of the North Platte 80s.
Well, they'd see me with my head in a notebook and walking back and forth to the dugout, getting instructions about who's coming in next. But we are on a roll right now, Bruce. We are
Yeah, what's
on a
going
roll.
on? You've been hitting, yeah.
Yeah, we're at a 4-game winning streak. We won that last game in Trinidad, 15-5. Joe Barron's, one of our veterans, got to the 6th inning throwing only 62 pitches, an average of 2 pitches per batter. We were tied 5-5. We had a 9-run 7th inning. We had a home run from our super sub and head Bill Woodfield groundskeeper Ryan Lutinsky had 4 hits and 4 RBIs and helped us win that game. And of note, relief pitcher John Lugering, who's a disciple of Sidearm Nation, he's a lefty sidearmer, his 3rd consecutive scoreless appearance. So we headed home 8-8. And during that game, there were a lot of runs being scored quickly. Now, we talked about the Pecos League offense with a lot of runs being scored, but I was sitting there talking to Joe Barron's after he pitched. There was a lot of runs being scored, and he didn't throw very many pitches, and we were being pretty economical. And I said, Joe, I think I have a new Pecos League metric, runs per hour. The idea is if you can score the runs fast, the games won't drag on to 3.5 and 4 hours, but we'll still have the typical high score. So now we're going to be tracking runs per hour to see how fast we can get through games and maybe get to some done through maybe 3 hours or 3 hours and 15 minutes if we get a high runs per hour rate.
When I get a chance over in the next day or two, I've got to take a look at this, but something tells me that I've heard runs per hour before, and it's with the Savannah Bananas. I'm pretty sure they have a stat like that. I haven't delved into them much this year because, of course, I'm pulled in a million different directions these days, but I'm pretty certain they do something like that. So I'm going to have to take a look at that.
Yeah, that would be the place to look for sure.
Tell me about that doubleheader on Friday, KC Iola.
Oh boy. Well, the game originally was supposed to be a 2-game series, with the Thursday game was delayed to Friday. Over 100 degrees at 5:30. And I just want to remind people that we are in the western part of the central time zone. So the sun is well above the horizon until 9 o'clock. So the 100-degree heat stays through the first 7-inning game and into the second. The plan is, or was at that point, was we have Garden City coming in for 4 games after that doubleheader. And Todd Everleth, the manager, his goal was to save the bullpen. And the starters for that game, the first game was Ben Smith, and the second game was Pierce Salbago. They covered almost all of the 14 innings, and it really, really helped prepare us for last night's game. Ben pitched into the 7th inning. There were some errors and a ground ball that hit the third base bag, and we were tied, but won on a walk-off walk in the bottom of the 7th. It's a little bit of an anticlimactic walk-off, but a win is a win. We were ecstatic to get through that game with a win, with a walk-off walk. And in the second game, Pierce Salbago, he pitched a complete game with 10 strikeouts and no walks. We won 7-1 to get our record to 10-8. It gave the pitching staff has been immense. A lot of credit to the pitchers, our catchers, John Haimowitz and Goose Rivera, and the guidance from Todd and Renee Colon, our player coach for the pitchers, and Trevor Nelson, also a player coach. We are in the top 3 in league ERA. So we were really pleased to have won that game. Although I will have to say that 21 walks by Kansas City Iola did help us in that doubleheader, as we're still working hard to score runs at the end of as of the end of that game.
So how's Todd doing with the Heat?
He's doing okay. He's got his routine. He's got his systems. You've been around baseball like him since he's been playing in high school. He's got all of his systems in place, and everybody has their own systems for hydration, shade, managing energy use, energy levels, and so we're in
Sure.
pretty good shape with the heat. We have one more day today of heat. Yesterday was hot as well in that first
Well,
game against Garden City.
yeah, how'd that go? You had another 100-degree day out there, huh?
Another 100-degree day. We fell behind 5-0 in the second, but starting pitcher Rene Colon hung on through 6 innings. He threw over 120 pitches in that heat, kept us in the game. And this is what we always say to our starting pitchers: just keep us in the game. We were down 7-5, a deficit that was maintained by, I mentioned last week, our no-fly zone in the outfield. No ball touches the ground out there. Rico Riley, our center fielder, made a fantastic leaping catch to keep the deficit at 7-5. We took the lead in the eighth. A new arrival, shortstop Alex Kornblau, who won that first game with the walk-off walk, he drove in the go-ahead run with a bases loaded hit by pitch. We ultimately won 9-8.
You know what? If you can't hit the ball, you may as well get hit by it, right?
I mean, this is what we say. Anything can happen in the Pecos League,
That's
and there
right.
are some pitchers that have a hard time finding the strike zone. So you have to be a disciplined hitter, know when to make good swing decisions, which is actually a little bit of a peek at our guest we'll be meeting with in a couple of minutes. I do want to note that another newcomer, Eddie Cafton from Mitchell College in Connecticut, he got the win. John Lugering, his fourth scoreless appearance through Sidearm Nation. And then our closer, Corey Stewart, held the lead. We now have a 4-game winning streak, and we are second in the Mountain Division behind Garden City. They have lost 3 games, and 2 of them have been by us.
Nutmeggers for the win. I love it. So we've got another interview today for the fans out there. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, speaking of swing decisions, John Haimowitz, one of our catchers, we had a delay in Trinidad, and I happen to have my little notebook that I keep notes on. And we were talking, and he asked me what was in the notebook, and I showed him how I have like a shorthand that I keep track of what's happening in the game, so I can at a glance see what happens in an inning, particularly for our pitchers, but also making notes about things to discuss later with Todd. And John said to me, I have a notebook also where I examine my what he calls swing decisions. So John is going to be joining us shortly to talk about how his notebook evolved and how it's helping him as a hitter here in the Pecos League. It's something he's developed over the years, and he's going to let us in to explain how it evolved and how he is maintaining it today here in the Pecos League.
All right, so we're going to cut away and go to that interview with John, and we'll be back on the other side to wrap it up and tell you about what's going on this week in the Pecos League. So hang on. Here comes the interview. We'll see you in a few minutes.
Greetings from the Canteen District here in North Platte. This is the historic area of downtown North Platte. I'm with catcher John Haimowitz. I scraped John's name off of baseball jobs overseas over the winter, found him through social media, invited him to come play in North Platte, and he's here. John's from Santa Clarita, California, but oddly enough, this is his third baseball team in Nebraska. John, tell us how a California kid ended up playing for 3 teams in Nebraska.
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me on, Evan. I'm excited to be on. So essentially, I coming out of high school didn't have too many offers to play collegiately, but the private hitting coach that I hit with, private instructor that I hit with weekly from my freshman year until my senior year, he had another guy that he hit with who was a year older than me go to Nebraska Wesleyan University. So when it came time for my senior year and starting to look for opportunities to play further past high school, he approached me and said, well, hey, I have this guy who I hit with as well, and he's in Nebraska right now. Would you ever want to play in Nebraska? And at first I was kind of shocked on the idea because, living in Southern California, that'd be quite a change to move to Nebraska to play baseball. But eventually I just kind of came to for myself, I just said, well, I want to play no matter what, so I'm willing to go anywhere. And so I ended up taking a visit out to Lincoln at Nebraska Wesleyan University and getting connected with the coach out there and decided to commit to play there. in college. So after my first year of college, when COVID happened, it shut down our season about midway through. I had returned home to finish the semester online, and I wanted to play summer ball. I wanted to stay in shape, stay in baseball shape. Well, obviously in California at the time, everything was shut down because of how strict the regulations were with our population size and everything. However, there was baseball happening in Nebraska, summer baseball happening in Nebraska, in Ogallala, just about 30 minutes west of North Platte. So two of my college teammates from Lincoln and Nebraska Wesleyan lived in a small town called Paxton, Nebraska, and they said, hey, come live with us and come play for our team in Ogallala. So then I ended up playing in Ogallala during the summer of 2020. That's my second team in Nebraska, and then now I'm here with the North Platte 80s as my third team.
Well, it's great. And in between, I understand you were with the New Brunswick Senior Baseball League, and it's noted to be the highest level of amateur baseball in Canada.
Yeah.
You were there for 2 years. Do you think that helped enough with your development that you were able to make the jump here to the Pecos League?
Definitely, yeah. I knew I wanted to play after college, and I was, looking into opportunities, overseas or internationally. Sort of the whole reason why I had signed up and made an account on baseball jobs overseas. And during March of my senior year of college, the general manager for a team called the Moncton Fisher Cats at the time reached out to me and said, hey, we're looking for a catcher for our 2023 season. Here's what we can do for you. We can set you up with housing. We can pay you a little bit. Come play with us. And so I said, well, I'm willing to take any opportunity, kind of like how leaving high school I was willing to go anywhere. I said, well, I'm willing to go anywhere to play further past college. So went there for my first year. Came back went back my second summer in summer of 2024. They rebranded to the Mets then, and it was overall a really great experience. I faced good competition. I faced some guys who were former affiliated guys who had played in other indie leagues or high level collegiate in the States, and the other imports on other teams, because that's the sort of situation that we were in. They had played at a high level in the States, so I think it definitely prepared me for this upcoming season, just in terms of just leveling up each time.
Well, here we are now in North Platte. We're on a 4-game winning streak. You're one of 2 catchers sharing the position with Goose Rivera, who went to Peru State in eastern Nebraska. The 80s have one of the top ERAs in the league, one of the top pitching staffs. And so I know that's a lot of your responsibility is working with the pitchers, whether you're game calling, game preparation, or out in the bullpen. But one night I think we were in Trinidad, and we had some time. I think it was a lightning delay, and I was walking around with my little notebook where I keep track of what happens in the game. I keep game notes about the pitching and observations that I can share with manager Todd Everleth after the game. And you asked me what was in my notebook, and I explained it to you, and then you mentioned it off anyway. Well, I have a notebook too. Yeah. And I said, well, what kind of notebook do you have, John? So tell us, what notebook do you keep, and how does it help your game?
Yeah, so I keep a notebook to go over what I call my swing decisions after each game. It's a notebook just purely based on like my offensive performance during the game, but it kind of came about during my senior year of college. I had a tough fall season my senior year. Just felt like I was kind of swinging at everything during inter squads. Wasn't really seeing the ball well. Just trying to make too much happen. And then between the time when fall practice ended and our spring season of my senior year started, I came across a video about the Orioles minor league system and how every guy in that minor league system after each game goes over what they call their swing decisions that game. Basically, whether they swung at a pitch that they should have swung at, or if they took a pitch that they should have taken, or vice versa. Did they swing at a pitch that they shouldn't have been swinging at, or did they take a pitch that they should have swung at initially? So I just came up with this idea, my own little way about it, where I was going to, remember. I feel like I had a pretty good memory enough to remember my at-bats, but also we have the luxury of, live stream video and stuff, so I can look back at my at-bat, kind of look at the sequences and stuff, and I would go through and I would essentially, grade my decision of, did I swing at the right pitch? Did I take the right pitch? Did I swing at a bad pitch? Did I take a pitch that I should have swung at? And I just started giving myself a check mark or not. And that was the very initial version of it, where I would just check mark yes or no. Did I make a good swing decision? Was it a swing, no swing? And then I just count up at the end how many good decisions I made.
So did you grade yourself, or was there a percentage? I mean,
Yes.
How did you measure it?
Exactly. So I at the end of, let's say that game I took 10 swings. Or no, let's say I saw 12 pitches. but 7 of them I had swung on. So I took 5 pitches. Well, if I made 6 good swing decisions out of 7, it was a 6 out of 7 percentage, whatever that is. And then the 5 pitches that I took, if I was 5 for 5, I took 5 pitches that I should have. So I ended up, inputting into a document on my computer so that I could keep track, so that at the end of the year, I could see what my total percentage of good swing decisions was versus poor, good take decisions versus poor take decisions. And that's sort of how it initially started with the percentages.
And this was your senior year
Yes.
at Nebraska Wesleyan.
Senior year at Nebraska Wesleyan.
And did it evolve when you went to the Fisher Cats and went to the New Brunswick League? How did the notebook evolve?
Yeah, it definitely had to evolve, because I started to realize, well, not only should I take into account, my swing decisions, yes or no, maybe I could actually input in the book what the pitch type was. Did I swing at a fastball? Did I take a fastball? Did I swing at a slider? Did I take a slider? Then you start playing with like what pitch type it was. And at that time, that was that year's version of it, where I had added, what pitch it was that I had swung at, so that now I'm getting a better idea of, okay, what are they throwing me first pitch? What are they throwing me when I get down 0-1? What are they throwing me when I get up 1-0? What are they doing when they're trying to get back into the count, or they're at an even count? So that's how it evolved year 2.
And so did you start keeping track by pitchers or teams? Because I'm assuming in New Brunswick you're playing a lot of teams at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
In college you do have rivalries, you play other teams, but not quite as many times. How many times in New Brunswick were you seeing the opposition?
Yeah, so in that league you're playing 4 other teams 8 times a year. So there's a lot of like, we're seeing the same guys again and again. So because of that, year 3 of the book, year 2 going back to New Brunswick, this is summer 2024. I said, well, now let me make this even more, intricate in my own mind. Like, let me add who I actually faced. Let me put the pitcher who I faced in the data sheet, so that now when I see them again, I now have the pitch type that they threw me in this count. What they were doing to get me out with, or if I made a bad swing decision, what were they going to throw me after? If I took a pitch that I should have swung at, what are they going to throw me after? So now it had evolved even to knowing who I was facing. And that was year 3 of the book, and then that's how it evolved then.
So you're in college, you had access to video.
Yeah.
You had some access to video in New Brunswick.
Yeah.
But you're still keeping it on a piece of paper. I don't know if you had a companion document. So in the high tech world of baseball, everything's videoed, obviously, in the affiliated leagues and a lot of the partner leagues.
Mm-hmm.
But in New Brunswick, I'm sure it was a little bit of a meshing together.
Yeah.
How do you blend your access to video, and also how much time does it take versus putting it in a notebook? I know we've seen pictures of guys in dugouts in the major leagues keeping a diary, just a diary of their at-bats, and I'm sure they go ahead and they mesh it with what they review with the hitting staff after the game. But talk a little bit more about the high-tech approach to baseball and your access to video, but putting it on a piece of paper instead of always having to log in. Do you think it makes a difference having it on a piece of paper in front of you versus on a screen?
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, New Brunswick was definitely a mesh up of both worlds colliding, because there were some games that didn't get streamed. So now I'm remembering my at bats, and like my dad has always said, baseball players have a really good memory. Like, they'll remember an at bat that they had a couple years ago against that guy, what he threw him on a certain pitch that he got a hit on. But so I felt like I had a good enough memory to remember my at bats. That night I would usually go home and do it right then and there, just because it's fresh in my mind. If I didn't have video stream, I'd go right home and I'd write it down. I think that there's something sort of not comforting, but it's something sort of therapeutic about writing it down, what had happened, because then you can kind of take time and think about, the at bat. You can go over the at bat again, and there's something tactical about writing, right? But there were times, there was no stream, and I'm having to remember my at bat, and then I'm inputting the at bat into a computer, so that yes, there is a database kept. I just really think at this level that we're playing at, because it's not an affiliated league, right, or any level before this, you kind of have to be your own statistician. You have to be your own analytics guy. You have to be your own scout for yourself, and you have to be your own hitting coach, in the sense that you're going to go over with yourself about how that at bat went, you're your own staff at this level.
Do you talk to other teammates if you come back to the dugout or after the game, if there's something you didn't remember, or you think there might be a takeaway that they might have seen that you didn't see? Do you work that into your log as well?
Usually I might share with them. I'll definitely share with them, what they might have thrown me in a certain, count, based on an at bat that I saw. Like if we're seeing a pitcher 2 weeks later after we saw him, and I saw him for 3 at bats 2 weeks ago, and he did the same pattern 3 times in my 3 at bats. I might share, hey, 2 weeks ago when we faced this guy, he did this in the same count 3 times. Just a heads up, might look for it. But generally, I'd never really asked teammates like to remember, hey, what pitch did he throw me right there? Just because I'd kind of remembered in the moment. Yeah.
Now, did I also see that you have some color coding in your notebook also?
Yeah, definitely. I like to use highlighters too, just because it kind of spices up the book a little bit, and it's easier to, when I end up going to input the data, I can look directly to find what I'm looking for. For instance, like a pink check mark, it's a good swing decision. If it's in the results of the at bat, I always put a box around it. But if it's in blue, if the box is in blue, it was a hard hit ball. The count at which the at bat ended in, I have it in green, a green box. And then if it was a swing that that was a foul ball, I mark it as yellow, like an S with yellow. If it's a swing and a miss, it's S with like a blue box around it, like a pen blue box. So I just like to use colors to just help me out.
So that way when you go back to look at it, the colors helps the at bat jump out at you to give you the signals about what happened, not just the numbers or the check marks.
Exactly, and also so that at the end of the year when I'm inputting into a data sheet to kind of go over what were my strengths, what were my weaknesses, it's easy for me to find what pitch was I swinging at and missing the most. Well, I just have to look for every time there's an S with a pen blue box around it, and then I look to the pitch type, and then boom, now I have the data on what pitch I was swinging and missing at most.
So let's talk about the Pecos League. So we're playing pretty much every day. A lot of times we're getting up in the morning and traveling. The games are live streamed. You're also having to be at the field for practices. How are you able to work keeping your notebook, and if you are going on to live stream, when do you find the time to do that? How do you work that into your day to assemble your data from the last game or the last couple of games so you have current information? Let's talk a little bit more about your daily schedule in the Pecos League and how you work accessing the video data in to make your notebook current.
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely, it's usually the morning after the game, and because the streams aren't like readily available, like in New Brunswick they were streamed on Facebook, so I could just log back into Facebook and just go to my at bats. You know what I'm saying? But my parents buy the stream, so then they video my at bats. So they're kind of they're on my team too. They're the staff too. While they're watching the game, they just have like a video going. So they'll send me my at bats, and I'll usually rewatch a video of my at bat to then go over the at bats in my notebook. But it's usually the morning after a game. I'll do that. And whether I'm doing laundry in the morning for the game later that day, because we're always having to wash our uniforms and whatnot. So while I'm doing that, I'm like, hey, let me get this done. Let me go over the at bats then. And then we're, like you said, it's an everyday thing. So working out right before we get to the field, then we're hitting batting practice, taking IO. We have a little bit of time off between infield and then having to be back at the field. At that time, I'm eating, and that's usually I've had to make that food earlier in the day, meal prep that food. So it's an everyday thing. We're from the moment you wake up until essentially 10:30, 10:45 p.m. when we leave the field. I mean, it's baseball related.
So the other day we got up, we had a game in Trinidad. It went late. We had to get on the road. We had a 6-hour ride. On that particular day, when did you finally get access to the video of that game?
I had just when that was the day where it was later that evening around. When we got back, actually that day we had a fundraising event.
No, right.
So right. I honestly didn't even look at that video until 2 days after the game. Right. But I knew that it was in the text message thread with my parents and whatnot. So I was just like, as long as I know it's there, I can go back and do it. But I usually won't go. I might go one game longer than at times. Sometimes just with this schedule, especially, I might go one game past the time that to input the data, but I won't go much longer than that. If I need to like get it written down, you know what I'm saying.
So as you wrap up here, John, you've made the transition from college to high-level amateur ball in Canada. What are your thoughts so far about the Pecos League? We got a pretty competitive team. We can hold our own against Garden City. It looks like one of the top rivals in the division. A lot of travel. The weather's been hot lately. What are your initial thoughts about the first third of the season here in the Pecos League?
I'm impressed with our team and our ability to have gelled so quickly. The host family I live with, I was just talking to the guy who lives there this morning, and I was saying it's crazy to think that we've only really all known each other for about a month now. I mean, it's the 22nd today, I believe, and we started spring training camp the 21st of May. So that was 1 month ago. So we've only known each other for a month, and I've only been playing with each other for about 3.5 weeks. And in that time we've almost matched last year's team's win total. Just in the month of June. So we're clicking as an organization, and I think that Todd and yourself and the rest of the coaching staff, Trevor and Renee, have done a really good job at assembling a team this year that's going to be, that's going to compete, that is competing and is going to compete deep into the summer. And we have a lot of depth, and we just gel as a team. We just have a good time together, which is, I think, the most important part. But I'm impressed with, the competition level. I'm impressed with our ability to compete, and it really does feel like a grind. It feels like that grind of like the minor league where you're playing every single day, and the travel's long, and we're staying in hotels, and we're waking up, and we're playing, and you're having to change your sleep schedule and your eating schedule, and you're working all around, playing a 3-hour game in the evening. It's been great though. It's been fun. Yeah.
Well, we're going to close here on a little bit of a sidelight, and one of the great things about baseball is there's just a little bit of extra time. As I mentioned, we learned about John's notebook during the lightning delay, and I don't remember what game we were standing around. John and I both share Jewish heritage. We think that we are cousins. I went to Ancestry.com, and I've got some Haimowitz relatives. And John's family is from Eastern Europe, is that right?
Yeah, Romanian Jew and Romanian Jewish, and yeah, there's some Italian in there too. Yeah.
So we're digging into Ancestry. I've got my wife back home using her paid Ancestry access to see if John and I can figure out what relative we share back in Eastern Europe. So it's also been cool to share our Jewish heritage in the dugout with some other players that also share Jewish heritage. But I'd like to thank you, John, very much for joining me this morning. We've got a little bit of free time today. Tonight we're taking on Garden City again, and best of luck with the pitching staff tonight, and hopefully we'll win our 5th straight.
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks again, Evan.
You're welcome. Take it easy, John.
All right, we're back. You're listening to Baseball's Last Frontier, Stories from the Pecos League. I'm Bruce McClure, and I'm here with Evan Katz, North Platte 80s bullpen coach. That's a really interesting talk with John just a few minutes ago, talking about that notebook. I hearken back to the days with the Red Sox with Schilling and his volumes of paper and scribbling in notebooks between innings and whatnot. The prepared guys are always the best ones to talk to.
Well, I think that's a very good point, and I think that with all the video that's been available for years with college players and in professional leagues, it's interesting that pen and paper has value and is I would call it a different way to keep track and provide the prompts that are needed to perform at a high level. And it was really interesting to hear how it's evolved for John and how he's blended it with access to video, yet still maintaining something on paper. And there are professionals today who are still logging things and writing, and a lot of players are encouraged, pitchers particularly, are encouraged to diary as a way to help express themselves on paper. So get out some of the emotions and possibly reflect, and also just to keep track and get better. So a diary, whether it's electronic or on paper, is a way to improve performance on the field.
The more we get into the internet age and the more we become an electronic society, the more I see pen and paper, notebooks, moleskin books, whatever you want to call it, coming back into vogue as a way to express one's ideas or feelings without really being embarrassed about it or having to worry about a backlash or a reaction from somebody that you're discussing. It really makes it personal for, in this case, the player, and allows that player to be very detailed or specific on paper and only discuss those ideas with those that he wants to discuss them with.
Well, the human brain is very intricate, and it's almost like when you research how the brain works in terms of reading, we read differently when we're reading a book. We don't read newspapers anymore, but when you're reading a book versus reading your phone. And I think the same thing applies for logging things. Your brain works differently when you put it on a screen as opposed to when you put it on paper. And for each individual, I think there's no hard and fast rules, but each individual is able to figure out what is the best recipe for them. So it's always good to experiment, electronic, paper, whatever, so that you can figure out, and this is whether it's baseball or any other profession or hobby, how can you bring out your best?
You've got to blend both sides of today's world, the analog side and the digital side, the way you want it to be blended, in an effort, as far as I'm concerned, to keep your head above water these days.
Well, it is important to help
Yeah.
sort things out. Also, there's a whole sorting process. When you
Yep.
sleep, your brain processes and sorts out. And when you're awake, you need to do the same thing.
Yep. I agree. All right. So let's get into games and whatnot this week. You are playing, this is being recorded on Sunday afternoon, and you're doing it Sunday against Garden City, correct?
Yep, game 2, Garden City. That's also a youth night. Wear your baseball jersey with an adult. You get in free. So
Nice.
that's tonight, Monday and Tuesday at 6:30 with Garden City. We're hoping to keep sending them a message as we beat them last night and hope to cut their lead in the Mountain Division.
These are 2-game swings. Every time you win or whatever happens, it's a 2-game swing. So big games coming up. You go jump back into the car though, and you're going right back to Trinidad, aren't you?
Back to Trinidad, 400 miles back to Trinidad for 2 games. Then we shoot across to Western Kansas, Garden City. It's actually 400 miles to Trinidad, but only 230 to Garden City, and then only 240 home. So those are our shortest legs for 4 games. Then we're back home for 2 against Blackwell. The first time we'll see them, the Blackwell Flycatchers, see them the first time on June 29th, it looks like, on our schedule.
So if I'm doing the math right, if you take 2 out of 3, is this division tied? Am I doing that math right?
To tell you the truth, I haven't looked at the standings this morning. I mean, we try not to look. We look at the standings from a relative situation, but our best metric is, are we playing good baseball? And last night there was enough good baseball on the field. We made really good plays at the times we needed to. We held back the Garden City's good offense, and our bullpen came in and shut them down. And with our pitching staff, we score runs like we did last night, we have a chance to win any game, whether it's Garden City or anybody else.
Well, in that case, we're going to let you go and get ready to score some more runs tonight. For more information on the Pecos League, check out their website at pecosleague.com. You can catch all the action in 2025 at pecosleague.tv as well. And finally, if you're a hardcore baseball fan, you need to join the Society for American Baseball Research, the premier baseball community. Offering an amazing baseball buffet of options to explore your fandom, SABR boasts more than 35 different research committees, over 80 regional chapters, and innumerable opportunities to connect with baseball minds across the world. For more information, go to sabr.org today. Evan Katz, any last wraps?
Only thing to point out is, after we play Garden City, these 3 games here and then 2 next week, we'll only see them 2 more times, and we'll be starting with Blackwell at the end of the month. Due to some schedule shuffling, we're going to play them twice at the end of June and then 14 times in July. So when you're playing all your games against division opponents, we're going to see them a lot. So it'll be interesting to see Blackwell, to see some new faces, but they'll become old faces very quickly in July.
They're going to become old friends very quick, huh? All right, brother. For Evan Katz, I am Bruce McClure. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.